Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Swallowed Star episode number 451 based on novel. So let's start. The other three leaders who had just woken up from a long sleep were all staring at the floating screen of light. They were full of expectations. After all, His Majesty the Godly King had given them an order, which was to find someone who could reach the top of Wu Chi Tower. They'd been waiting for this for a long time. Huh? This soldier. He's riding Golden Claw God, and based on its speed, that soldier has never used the godly power burning technique. All those three leaders kept observing Luo Feng on the screen. As for the other 9 soldiers, the leaders glanced at them and ignored them. They had seen many elite soldiers in all this time, and their attention only would be drawn when there were soldiers who were powerful enough. They kept watching. Time passed, and the 3 leaders were silent. "Brilliant body technique," said one of the towering leaders in sanguine armor. "He has many ingenious techniques. He's only a law master, yet he created such techniques, and he's proficient. He's literally playing with the rock giant during the combat." Little did he know that Luo Feng had fought many great beings in the space of inheritance for perfecting his body techniques, and he had even fought the 3 ancestral teachers many times. Under such pressure, it was easy for him to fight the stupid rock giant. Even eternal true gods in the world of Jin were qualified to engage in trial battles with beings like 3 ancestral teachers. "Even I am moved," said the towering leader. "You're an eternal true god. You're an eternal true god. Even you are moved," said one of the other 3 leaders. When His Majesty the Godly King left, all 4 leaders were sealed true gods of void space. After a long period of time, one of them became an eternal true god. However, based on the order of His Majesty the Godly King, all 4 leaders had responsibilities, so they couldn't leave the world of Jin at all. All 4 generals were eternal true gods, but they couldn't leave the world of Jin either. After His Majesty the Godly King left, some eternal true gods had been born, and they had left world of Jin one by one. However, none of them had come back. All 4 leaders were amazed by Luo Feng's body technique. If the body technique had been performed by a true god of void space, they wouldn't have been amazed at all, but it was performed by a law master. The comprehension between law masters and true gods of void space were at completely different levels. They had never seen a law master who was able to do that. He has the best technique out of all the candidates we've seen since we started to guard Godly King Valley. He has an excellent body technique. And he's great at other techniques as well, said one of the other 4 leaders. The towering leader said, "Perhaps it's likely that he'll be able to reach the top of Wu Chi Tower." The other 3 leaders immediately went quiet. They were all solemn, and the atmosphere was grave. They all stared at the screen. Accomplishing the dream of His Majesty the Godly King was more important to them than becoming eternal true gods, even more important than their own lives. On the 2nd floor of Wu Chi Tower, in those 10 miniature universes on the dark red ground, the first 5 soldiers all looked in despair as lots of their godly bodies were consumed. Although the second 5 soldiers also looked embarrassed, they had only been in the miniature worlds for a short period of time, so they looked much better. As for Luo Feng, he looked completely fine. After all, ever since being transported to the miniature worlds, his godly body hadn't been consumed at all. He hadn't even performed the first level of Duan Mia yet. With Golden Claw God, his power was much stronger, so he was perfectly capable of fighting true gods easily. The first 5 soldiers lost much of their godly bodies. Though they are still alive, some of them will die in no time. Golden Claw God Luo Feng glanced around the 9 miniature worlds in the distance. Only he was able to take a peek around at a crucial moment like this. All 5 of them suddenly started to scream in agony. All 5 dark red rock giants in the miniature universes at the front started to scream with madness. The screaming of the rock giants was much different from the bellowing before. Not only did it sound odd, but it could also affect someone's soul. Even the soldiers in other miniature worlds were affected. Luo Feng and the other 4 soldiers from the same group couldn't help looking into the distance. Following the mournful screaming, all 5 soldiers from the first group panicked as they sensed that dangers were coming. Out of nowhere, a giant rock hand extended out of a crack beside the rock giant, and there were burning fluids surrounding it. There were 4 giant rock hands, and each was at least 1,000,000 kilometers wide. Attached to those giant rock hands were thick arms. They showed up out of nowhere and grasped for the elite soldiers. Ah! One of the elite soldiers with a tattoo on his face tried to dodge it, but half of his godly body was grabbed by that giant rock hand. The giant rock hand held the soldier tightly. The ancient engraving picture kept diving, and lots of flowing light was poured from it, giving the soldiers much less time to dodge it. The dark red rock giant roared as it hit the soldier with its fist. That soldier who was hit was in anguish. He was being grasped and struck at the same time, which constantly consumed his godly body. Break! 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 The soldier kept fighting, and he even tried to use his godly hammer with his godly power, and he finally broke out of that giant rock hand right before the rock giant tried to hit him with its fist again. However, he had already lost a great deal of his godly power. Suddenly, another giant rock hand burst out of the crack. All of a sudden, all 5 soldiers were crumbling. It was a real life-or-death situation for them. And they were being crushed. Under the combined attacks of the giant rock hands, the dark red rock giants, and the ancient engraving pictures, the soldiers didn't have enough time to react to the attacks. They were all on the verge of collapse. The other 4 soldiers in Luo Feng's group all panicked. No. We're in deep trouble. Those 5 soldiers are suffering from the combined attacks, and soon, we'll be them. Golden Claw God Luo Feng was contemplating. Apparently, 4 giant rock hands showed up at the same time, and they are around the dark red giant. Besides, the engraving picture is descending. Luo Feng immediately realized that it was dangerous. Those 4 giant rock hands alone were not a threat. However, once the soldiers were captured, the rock giant would be able to ravage them however they wanted. Fortunately, there were only 4 giant rock hands. What should I do? He wondered. Without any signs, the 4 giant rock hands showed up. Without any signs. What should I do about them? Luo Feng was nervous. If the ancient engraving picture hadn't been declining, he would certainly have flown higher so that he could dodge those rock hands. Instead, the ancient engraving picture was declining, giving the soldiers less and less time to dodge the flowing light and making it difficult for them to fly into the sky. They must be kept at bay. Luo Feng shook his head. Some of the soldiers will die for sure. They were indeed in a hopeless situation. With the ancient engraving picture descending, it was more and more difficult for the 5 soldiers to survive. Countless streaks of light kept striking below, and the engraving picture was dropping, hitting the soldiers over and over. The power contained in each streak of light could rival that of a true god. Huge hand. Rock giant. And an engraving picture? The space kept being narrowed, and it was difficult to dodge the rock hand. Soldiers in the first group were all burning their power and screaming, performing the best techniques they had to dodge those attacks. They would try anything just to stay alive longer. No. 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 A strange beast with 12 wings was suddenly seized by the rock hands. The dark red rock giant started to pound the strange beast with 12 wings. With a wail, the strange beast with 12 wings was annihilated, and all that was left were armors and valuables. The dark red giant raised its head and roared, excited. The rock giant and the rock hands all turned into crimson fluid and slipped into the cracks in the ground. The armor of the dead strange beast soldiers also fell into the cracks. The miniature world disappeared. Only 9 miniature worlds were left on the second floor. The other 4 soldiers from the former group were still struggling. It still hasn't ended? It should have stopped now. I've lost most of my power. If it goes on, I won't be able to hold it. The other 4 soldiers were all anxious. To law masters, losing a small part meant a tumble in power. Godly power would only be slowly consumed at the start of the battle, yet as the battle went on, godly bodies would be consumed at a much faster pace. The more godly bodies were consumed, the more godly power would be lost. It was a vicious circle. Everyone was in a panic. The soldiers from Luo Feng's group were all apprehensive as well. We have to save our godly power. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive the second floor. Just as they were feeling apprehensive, 5 shrill voices drilled into the souls of those 5 soldiers. The other 4 soldiers in Luo Feng's group were horrified. Why so soon? We arrived much later than them. They had been transported to the miniature worlds half an hour later than the former group, yet the ultimate nightmare arrived only 10 minutes later. Luo Feng surged and looked at the sky. That enormous ancient engraving picture kept falling down. The dark red rock giant also rose, following Luo Feng. Its job was to kill him. Each of the rocky palms was 1,000,000 kilometers wide, and the arms were exceedingly long. They extended and tried to seize Luo Feng, but he flew into the sky in advance. With a buffer of time, he could easily dodge the giant rock hand. In that ancient palace, the 4 sealed leaders from Godly King Valley, 1 eternal true god, and 3 true gods of void space were all staring at the screen, looking forward to seeing how Luo Feng performed on the 2nd floor of Wu Chi Tower. Watching the screen, the leaders could see Golden Claw God Luo Feng easily dodge the giant hands. He was toying with that dark red rock giant, those beams of light couldn't even touch him. However, as the ancient engraving kept diving and the distance grew shorter, Luo Feng found it harder to dodge all the attacks. He was hit from time to time. Duan Mie. The first level of burning godly power. Luo Feng couldn't help it. The 4 leaders smiled as they watched Luo Feng on the screen. Ha ha ha. This soldier Milky Way finally starts to perform the godly power burning technique. He's so patient that he has just now started the technique. As a soldier from the special army, he must know the first level of godly power burning from the basic inheritance. After performing the godly power burning technique, Luo Feng's attacks, defense, and speed were immediately improved. Everything became easy for him again. It was a piece of cake for him to handle the rock hand, the dark red rock giant, and the traces of light, all at the same time. After several minutes, the ancient engraving kept diving. It almost touched Luo Feng, forcing him to fly down a bit. He couldn't linger close to it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to dodge the beams of flowing light. The leaders spoke up one by one. The 2nd floor is nothing to that soldier Milky Way. That's right. Although he might suffer some losses at the final moment, his godly body has barely been consumed. It has no effects on him. In the miniature worlds on the 2nd floor of Wu Chi Tower. It still hasn't ended yet? The teenager in the dark red armor was trying his best to run away. The engraving picture was only 1,000,000 kilometers away from the ground now, so he couldn't fly high. The giant rocky hand from the cracks couldn't easily seize him. The teenager kept getting hit by the flowing light, yet he didn't care whatsoever. It was impossible for him to dodge the flowing light, and all his attention was focused below. The rock hand rushed out. The armored teenager tried to dodge it but realized he wasn't fast enough. No, said the teenager as the palm, which was 1,000,000 kilometers wide, reached out, extending a portion of it out of the crack. I've lost too much of my godly body, and my power's been significantly weakened. I can't dodge it even if I try. The armored teen felt pitiful. At the same time, he controlled his weapon to internally attack that rock hand. The dark red rock giant rushed toward the armored teen and slapped him relentlessly. He was slapped 20 times instantly. Finally, he fled out of the giant, rocky hand. Yet the light started to fall on him. I can't, the armored teen could feel his godly body quickly growing weaker and weaker. The giant hand burst out of the crack again. Before it could even touch the armored teen, he was annihilated by the flowing light. Only pieces of armor and machine-type valuables were left. Another soldier had died. Half a minute after the armor teen died, 3 surviving soldiers had their miniature worlds dissipated, and the rock giants were reduced to crimson fluids and flowed back to the cracks. The soldiers who survived were all dazed. Ha! I'm still alive. Still alive. I was in despair. Finally, it ended. If I had stayed there 1 second more, I would have been dead. The 3 soldiers who survived were overjoyed. They had been through hell to survive the miniature worlds. The best of them only had 1/10 of his power remaining, and the weakest had less than 1/1000th of his power left, which meant he would have died if he had stayed there any longer. But the 3 of them had ultimately survived. The 3 soldiers immediately recovered from their rapture. What should we do? Our godly bodies couldn't be weaker, and we're more fragile than ever. This is only the 2nd floor of Wu Chi Tower. There's still the 3rd floor, 4th floor, and 5th floor. How are we going to survive those? That's right. We're already so weak. The 3 soldiers were all worried. We're not the only ones who are weak. It's a fair game. Perhaps Wu Chi Tower will provide us with some valuables to recover our godly bodies. What do you mean by not the only ones? Look at that soldier from Python River Army. He's still suppressing the dark red rock giant. A soldier pointed into the distance, and the other 2 soldiers followed his gesture. The soldiers from the next group, especially Luo Feng, were still at the peak of their power. After performing the first level of burning godly power, he can even suppress the dark red rock giant. He often uses that dark red rock giant as a shield to block the flowing light and the giant rock hand. How can he be so powerful? The 3 soldiers who survived exclaimed their surprise. All of a sudden, 3 light pillars arrived and covered the 3 soldiers. They immediately disappeared. They are being transported to the 3rd floor? Luo Feng glanced around. 2 of the 5 died, and the other 3 are extra weak. This may be the case for my group as well. With the ancient engraving picture falling, the soldiers in Luo Feng's group suffered even worse. Eventually, soldiers began to die. There were also 3 soldiers from Luo Feng's group who survived. I've survived. Ha ha. I've survived. The other 2 soldiers were thrilled, but they both kept their distance when they saw Luo Feng. Luo Feng glanced at the thin Shushong and chuckled, is lucky enough to still be alive. Shushong was terrified and regretful. He knew that Milky Way was onto him. 3 light pillars appeared, covered Luo Feng and the other 2, and transported them away. The 3rd floor of Wu Chi Tower was a vast plain. Luo Feng and the other 2 soldiers appeared on it. The 4th group has arrived. Both the 3rd and the 4th group have 3 left. Luo Feng looking into the distance. He saw beings in the distant. Some of them were soldiers, while some were strange beasts. There were many of them. 11 soldiers were on the plain. 11 soldiers? Luo Feng thought. 6 survived from the 3rd and the 4th groups. The other 5 must be from the 1st and the 2nd groups. The 3rd floor of Wu Chi Tower requires all the soldiers to gather together? Luo Feng observed them carefully. Suddenly, the survivors from the 3rd and the 4th group were all terrified. They teleported and tried to stay away, sealing the space ripples around them. What? The survivors from the 1st and the 2nd groups were all dazed. It was clear that the soldier before them was apparently on a whole different level than the other soldiers. They were scared by no more than a look from him. We need to stay away from him as well. All of them are trying to stay away from him. That soldier from Python River Army must be terrific. The survivors from the 1st and the 2nd groups didn't know Luo Feng's power, but they were careful enough to stay away from him and seal the space ripples around them. Luo Feng shook his head and smiled. Time flew, and on the 6th day, another round of soldiers arrived. There were 2 of them. After a short while, the 6th group of soldiers arrived, and there were 3 of them. 2 months passed. 38 soldiers had already gathered on the plain on the 3rd floor of Wu Chi Tower. Some of the new soldiers were friends of the soldiers in the first 4 groups, and they soon learned how terrific the soldier from Python River Army was. Most tried to stay away from him, yet some were confident enough not to. He's only a tribal warrior, yet you are all so terrified of him, a giant plant life form said with resent. There were colorful flowers on its body, and on the largest flower were several eyes and mouths. I killed tens of thousands of tribal warriors before I joined the army. The plant life looked at Luo Feng with blatant provocation. Your godly body is almost 100 million kilometers tall, said one of the soldiers from afar. Of course you don't need to fear him. Luo Feng didn't care whatsoever about the emotions of those around him. He was just standing there. Finally, 2 more soldiers arrived, and something happened in the world of the plains. A whirlpool that looked like ripples of water appeared in the sky. All 40 soldiers who had survived looked to the sky. Space and time trembled. All 40 soldiers, no matter where they were transported directly under the giant whirlpool. Screens of light fell from the whirlpool in the sky. They covered an area with a diameter of 1 billion kilometers, separating it from the outside world entirely. The diameter of the whirlpool was also 1 billion kilometers. A giant eye appeared at the center of the whirlpool. It looked down at those below. All of a sudden, the soldiers felt that their souls had clotted. Wu Chi Tower. An ancient voice echoed in the ears of all soldiers. Your lives are in danger on the first 3 levels. However, if you can survive the first 3 levels, you'll be safe. From the 4th level, you'll have a chance to get inheritance and valuables, continued the ancient voice. Of course, that's only after you survive the 3rd level. High up in the air, the gigantic divine eye was looking down at 40 warriors. An aged voice continued to resonate within their minds. All you 40 warriors, based on the powers you have displayed in the first 2 levels, on this 3rd level, only 15 of you will be able to survive. The 15 of you who can survive the 3rd level will make it up to the 4th level and earn yourselves various incentives. Until you endure the crisis on the 3rd level, entering the battleship is forbidden. Doing so would render you an immediate failure, and you will fall straight into annihilation. The words of the aged voice gave Luo Feng a shock. How could there only be 15 survivors? The majority of the warriors instantly started to worry. Those who could make it past the third level would definitely be extraordinary, but still, more than half of them would die. Other than a handful like Luo Feng, the other warriors would certainly not be daring enough to say they would survive this level. Another 2 explosive sounds rang, and huge branches and leaves could be seen spreading out. They radiated a dazzling golden light that continuously lashed at every tribal warrior. Upon receiving such a direct lashing, one pitiful warrior who had been left with less than 1% of its godly power was annihilated to nothingness. What? It killed a warrior. The other fortunate survivors looked on in shock. Even Luo Feng looked over. The warrior who had made a move earlier was a plant life form, and one of the radiantly colored flowers that formed part of this it sneered, saying, Wu Chi Tower mentioned that only 15 could survive, but it did not forbid us from fighting one another. The more I kill, the fewer opponents I am left with. Ha ha. Meet your doom. The torture from the miniature world that they had all just experienced on the second level had left most of these warriors with severe injuries. The weakest ones did not even have 1/1000th of their peak power left. Escape. Beware. Let's go. Several warriors who considered themselves to be severely injured were quick to scuttle off in all directions while trying their best to maintain a safe distance from the more powerful warriors. However, high up in space, the divine eye had enshrouded an area that was within 1 billion kilometers of the domain of light. No matter how hard they tried to escape, there was no way they could make it out of this area. At that point, the area that was within the divine eye's domain of light, there was total chaos. Luo Feng stood rooted to his spot, ignoring everything in his surroundings. Besides, there was not a single warrior who dared approach him. Even the most arrogant warrior, who was a plant life form, did not dare to attack him. The gigantic divine eye high up in space suddenly lit up. Streaks of golden light shone down and gradually spread out. Ah! This is... Several warriors who had still been fighting earlier on suddenly felt as though their souls, life imprints, were struck by a sudden impact. Many of them temporarily stopped fighting one another. First and foremost, they had to focus on mounting a vigilant defense. No one knew what kind of danger lurked in the third level. If it was some very terrifying danger and they remained distracted with all the fighting, then they would truly be courting their own doom. A short moment later, 3 out of the 40 warriors were annihilated. All 3 had already been near death from severe injuries sustained while on the second level. They had just been trampled to death. Even their automaton-type treasures, armors, and weapons were taken away from them. Luckily, this Milky Way did not make any move. Xu Song looked at Luo Feng from afar, then tilted his head back to look high up into the sky where the divine eye was. The many warriors on land were all looking up at the divine eye. The divine eye had released an endless golden light that enshrouded everything beneath it. The powerful impact of its willpower was, to the relief of the warriors, bearable for them all. This third level, what kind of danger does it contain? Just this one divine eye? The second level started out with mere diagrams of secret engravings, but after that, out popped the rock giant and all. Who knows? There might be some kind of bizarre danger that may emerge on this third level. The warriors were all filled with apprehension. There were even some who immediately flew up into the air, not daring to stay near to the ground lest something suddenly appear from the grassland. The endless golden light shone down on the grassland and upon every single warrior. Its power was gradually increasing. The impact of the willpower is becoming stronger. Could this be the third level of Wu Chi Tower? A test of willpower? One after another, the warriors were resisting. No one was willing to concede defeat so easily. They were all aware that this third level was the final level that contained the threat of death. Starting at the fourth level, there would only be various incentives and rewards to gain. Who would not want to take that gamble? Luo Feng endured the impact of the willpower as he silently sighed to himself. No wonder those warriors who were severely injured had been unable to get any treatment. This was a test of willpower. The loss of a godly body would have a great impact on combat power but would only affect the influence on willpower by a minute amount. The impact of willpower is gradually increasing. Luo Feng turned his head and looked into the distance at that Xu Song, who had taken the form of a big bird. This impact of willpower has no influence over me at all. I must seize the moment while the impact of the willpower is still weak and get rid of him first. Su! Luo Feng's speed skyrocketed, and without further delay, he flew toward Xu Song far in the distance. Xu Song was in the midst of resisting the impact of that willpower while remaining watchful over his surroundings. He might have had Bib Bird, which boasted impressive escape skills, but earlier on, when he had been on the second level of Wu Chi Tower, he had sustained serious injuries because of Bib Bird's relatively weaker frontal combat skills. Even though he had been able to recuperate for recovery during the downtime, upon entering the second level, he only managed to recover around 50% of his godly body. His power was left with only 1/10 of what he had started with. Of course, he had to exercise extra vigilance. Huh? Xu Zhong spotted a streak of light flying toward him from afar. Milky Way. Xu Zhong was dumbfounded. He was terrified of this Milky Way. Xu Zhong transformed into a large white bird and picked up speed as he flew. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission, Milky Way, Milky Way. We are both from the East Army. Why must you pursue me so painstakingly? If I don't kill you, who else should I kill? Luo Feng returned the voice transmission coldly. Xu Zhong suddenly felt his heart sink. Earlier on, when they had just started on the first level of Wu Chi Tower, he had launched a sneak attack on Luo Feng. At the time, he had told Luo Feng, "You are a new recruit. If I don't kill you, who else should I kill?" Now, the tables were suddenly turned. Xu Zhong was desperate as he replied via voice transmission, "Milky Way, so long as you spare me, I am willing to offer this automaton-type treasure as a gift to express my apology." Humph! Luo Feng merely replied with a cold snort. While his goal was to break through levels in this Wu Chi Tower, Luo Feng was not really interested in killing. But he truly abhorred people like Xu Zhong. To one's face, they acted as though they were brothers, yet the moment one turned his back, they would pounce. Back when Luo Feng had still been a nobody, he had once been met with a sudden ambush by his partner, Mo Luo, while journeying about Demon Note Mountain. Since then, Luo Feng had cultivated a deep hatred for such a character. Xu Zhong? Of course, he had to kill him. Luo Feng pursued as Xu Zhong fled. Xu Zhong took the form of a big white bird, and although his power was only 1/10 of what he had started with, his speed of flight was still much faster than Luo Feng. Blaze up! With a move of intention, Luo Feng executed the first volume of extermination, and the speed of Golden Claw God Luo Feng immediately soared. He had his Shawu wings, which were adept in acceleration during flight. He might not have brought it with him to the world of Jin, but he had studied it meticulously for over 8 million eras. He had also studied Shawu wings as an overall treasure, along with many other secret techniques. And the body technique, Flowing Gold, was highly suited for acceleration. Luo Feng's speed skyrocketed. Milky Way, Milky Way. Xu Zhong looked behind him with a flustered expression. What will it take for you to let me go? Luo Feng transmitted his voice message with great indifference. When you are gone for good, naturally, I will let go of you. They flew, one after the other, both moving at a terrifyingly fast speed. The area under the domain of light was shrouded by the divine eye. It was merely 1 million kilometers wide. Given their current speed, they would not require more than a second to traverse the entire region within the domain of light. This was why Xu Zhong had been following an arc-shaped route while flying, turning corners as he tried his best to fly. Luo Feng could not reach him even after half a minute of hot pursuit. Perhaps, because he was in the face of imminent death, Xu Zhong was putting in his utmost best. Or perhaps Bib Bird was exceptionally skilled at flying. If I execute the second volume of extermination, I can capture you in an instant. Luo Feng shook his head to himself. In Nine Smoke Marsh, he had dared to execute the second volume of extermination because the area had not been under the control of warriors. But at Wu Chi Tower, every move he made was apparently under close observation. Thus, it was only natural for him to refrain from executing the second volume of extermination. Let's see how long you can hold out. Luo Feng continued to give chase, forcing Xu Zhong to stay vigilant without any chance for a breather. Xu Zhong was extremely agonized, resentful, and regretful. Time continued to pass. The divine eye, high up in the sky, was radiating a golden light that contained a willpower with an impact that was continuously on the rise. In the beginning, they had all been able to bear the impact easily, but now, a number of warriors were feeling the pressure. The impact of this willpower has reached the ultimate limit of a law master. Some of the warriors were already in extreme agony. They might have all been elite warriors, but in respect to willpower, most could be regarded as having achieved the breakthrough of the bottleneck to attain the willpower at true god level, while there were still a handful who fell short of this standard. Kill. Kill. While trying to bear the impact of this willpower, there were warriors who persisted in fighting and killing, especially warriors who personally felt that they were lacking in terms of willpower. All the more, they were giving their all to eliminate opponents. The more we kill, the fewer opponents we have. So long as the last 15 are left standing, everything comes to an end. Kill. Everything fell into darkness. Over 30 warriors transformed into streaks of flowing light and flew at high speed while occasionally crossing paths with one another. Under such circumstances, where they had to fight for their lives while resisting the impact of the willpower, the moment they let their guard down, they would likely be hit. Those who were slower or had weaker powers would gradually begin to be annihilated. The number of warriors was starting to drop. As the impact of the willpower of the divine eye high in the sky gained strength, the warriors were all growing fearful. Earlier, when they had all been fighting one another, the impact of the willpower of the divine eye had only been a small threat. But now, the impact of that willpower was gradually beginning to exceed the limit of endurance for a number of these warriors. No. No. As the impact of the willpower exceeded the ultimate limit of a law master. 9 warriors, who were flying at high speed while dodging and fighting, started experiencing convulsions throughout their entire bodies. The next moment, they fell into a state of unconsciousness, then collapsed. Obviously, the impact of the willpower was too much to bear. And high up where it was, the divine eye shot out 9 streams of eye-piercing purple light. 9 streams of purple light struck the 9 unconscious warriors who had fallen, causing them to be annihilated, only leaving behind pieces of armor, automaton-type treasures, and some other belongings. Luo Feng, who was in the process of pursuing Xu Shong, was flying past at an extremely fast rate of speed. He whistled past and, with a single wave of his hand, collected all the belongings that one of the 9 warriors had left behind. That's quite a large number of treasures. He swept through the surroundings. This third level of Wu Chi Tower offers quite a good opportunity to seize large amounts of treasures. If I miss this chance, I don't know if I will ever encounter another opportunity in the future. Every warrior was, in essence, a moving treasure vault. Nearly every warrior would at least possess 2 automaton-type treasures. After all, they had made it through the first and second levels. In the distance, Xu Shong was still trying his best to escape. I must escape. I want to escape. I cannot die. Ah. This impact of the willpower is getting too strong. I don't think I can bear it any much longer. The divine eye shone upon the grasslands and onto every warrior. The willpower of those golden rays contained an impact that was growing stronger with the passing of time, albeit quite slowly. Warriors who were unable to bear the increasing impact only had one way out: death. Only 15 could survive. This video will end here.